In this video, I want to show you a quilt stitching pattern that is easy to do on blocks from 16 inches square, which is what this one is, all the way down to, this is a 5, you could do it on a 4-inch or a 3-inch square, and you can go all the way down to a model 20 with this, although with some of the machines that you might use as you go smaller, you might have to do the circle by tracing a plate or something instead of an attachment. Now, let me start at the beginning. I am doing quilts right now of 16-inch blocks, and I needed to be able to fill in the space of the block without over quilting or intricately quilting, because I need to get these done fairly quickly. Now, where in the old days maybe I would hand quilt the whole square or free motion quilt, I need these to be consistent, and I need them to quilt the fabric about 4 inches apart, because that's the rating on my batting. So I started, I went through 4 steps of adding elements until I got to this. And this is what it looks like on plain muslin. The other reason I developed this was for bandana quilts, because bandanas, as you can tell, you know, they have so much visual element already that you either are going to hand quilt around each element, or you just want something simple to quilt the whole piece down. So that's where this comes in. Now, this is called 96 trees, but I haven't gotten to the trees yet. So let me explain. So this one is for a bandana type quilt, only it's done in muslin with a fabric backing, and 16-inch squares that are going to be 3 squares across and 4 squares down. So you need 12 squares of 16 inches. And I do have a video up on the bandana quilt that talks more about this type of quilt. Now, this pattern of stitching is done in 4 steps, and it will, the order of the steps can change depending on whether you're using an electric machine or a hand crank. A treadle is kind of equal to an electric because you have your 2 hands to guide the fabric. So, step 1, technically, you should find the center of your piece of fabric, and you're going to put an X on the whole square. And technically, you should go from the center to each corner. So that would be 4 different things going out. And you're making a big X. So you can see that big X there. Now, I found with my 1591, that I could actually start here and go all the way to the other side without pushing the fabric out of the way or in bunches or any of that. So you'll have to see what your own machine does. A rule of thumb for quilting is to always start in the middle and move out, but it's faster if you can do them in one straight line. So the first element is the X. The second element is the circle, which in this case I used, and I'm using Singer machines. I used a Singer circular stitcher, and I don't have the attachment right here, but I do have another video up about the stitcher. And so for the circle, you can do it 2 ways. You can use the circular stitcher on a full-size bed Singer machine, such as a 237, a 1591, a 1588. You can also use it for a 10-inch circle like this on a 99 or a Spartan. The smaller 3/4 size machines, because of the way the attachment attaches, this is a 237, and the attachment attaches here and has a pin that sits up on this long bar over here, and that's about how far out it is when you're doing a 10-inch circle. But when you're doing a 2-inch circle, the far end of the bar needs the amount of space on a full bed singer to extend all the way down here. So if you were to put it on a Spartan or a 99 and try to do a 2-inch circle, it wouldn't work right because you can't extend the bar far enough on the shorter machine. So generally it's best to think of the circular stitcher with a full-size singer. But anything larger than, I think, a 2.5-inch circle you could also do on a 99 or a Spartan. If you don't have either a singer machine or the circular stitcher attachment, you can just take a dinner plate and turn it upside down and lightly trace it with some kind of chalk or even a light pencil. If you know your stitching is going to be, your pencil marks have to be accurate the first time, and the stitching would have to cover them. You have to be careful. Some chalks won't come out of muslin. But you can trace. There are also fabric markers that wash away. So you can trace your circle and then stitch it. So that's the second element. The third element is 4 lines side to side, which in my thinking are really the 4 directions. Now again, with a hand crank, it's easier to start at the center and move out. But I found with all of the electrics I tried this with, I could start up at that edge and just go straight down without getting too much puckering. And an electric has an advantage where you can manipulate the fabric and pull it and keep it more taut than with a hand crank, because you only have your one hand with a hand crank. So you need a top to bottom and a left to right. So at this point you have an X, a circle, the 4 directions going side to side, and the last element to add is a square around the circle. And what I did was put a pin. I wanted to keep it, say, an inch. That's about 1.5 inches away from the circle. So again, you need a visual line. You start here and you go over to the next corner line in a straight line. You're actually adding more lines. And this one's just slightly off. Like this is a little bit wide right here, and this is a tiny bit wide. But it's not all that noticeable. So the 4 elements are right there. The first is the X from corner to corner. The second is the circle, and this is a 10-inch circle on a 16-inch square. I actually cut the fabric 16.5 inches to allow for seam allowance. The third one is 4 lines side to side. You can think of the 4 directions of the wind, north, south, east, west. And the last element is the square around the circle by going from diagonal to diagonal. Now, I call this 96 trees because what I plan on doing is using probably my 1591 and possibly one of the other machines, and the zigzag cam attachment on the machine, and I'm going to zigzag trees on here. And if you think about it, that makes a wonderful centerpiece for Christmas, or if you just love trees like I do. And if you then put 8 trees on each block and put your overall quilt together, you end up with 96 trees. 8 times 12 is 96. So you can either leave it like this as a plain, simple way to quilt a 16-inch block. On a bandana, all of the stitching is going to disappear because the white of a bandana is going to pop out much more readily. This is a test square, And on this one, I actually, to do the circle, I traced a tape measure. I have a round tape measure. But you can see how nobody's going to notice the quilting, and they're going to notice the bandana fabric. But at the same time, this is a wonderfully quilted square. And this could very easily be done on a Model 20. This is a 4-inch square. I was going to do 3-inch. So you could do up to 6-inch without a problem and do these squares all the time, giving you a very quilted fabric that you then sew these together as a rag quilt, and you have a wonderfully quilted rag quilt. So, again, it's called 96 Trees, but you can stop there. This is what the design actually looks like. That's on denim. If you used a dark fabric and bright thread, you could really make an impact quilt. And underneath there are all of the ones I have to finish. Now, I used, like I said, several machines, and I'm at the 237 now. I just have been switching among machines lately. But with either any of the electrics, I have found that I can, like I said, just go side to side or corner to corner. The circles went very well with the circular stitcher, and it was only on the hand cranks that I said, you know what, I'm going to start here. And I'm going to do it this way because it's just better for the block overall. So it's called 96 Trees, but you can either leave it plain like this. You can use thread to be a design element. You could paint the trees on. It gives you space for 8 elements. You could call it something else. You could put lollipops or balloons or teddy bears or anything you want in those 8 spaces and call it 96 teddy bears or 96 balloons. It's a very simple quilt idea, and this particular design leaves me with each of these spaces is 4 inches or less. So the batting is contained and held in place. So no matter what you do to this, it's not going to shift the batting. And the smaller you go, that's going to be even less of a problem. So it's just an easy way to quilt a 16-inch square all the way down to a 3-inch. I was thinking I have 3-inch squares cut, and if you look at this one, see how tiny my 8 sections are? I could even make a miniature quilt. This is a 4-inch, so it would be smaller than this, with miniature trees. And with each one of these going, say I made 9 patches or 4 patches out of this, you can make a tablecloth with miniature trees for Christmas. So the ideas are almost endless, and it gives you sections to fill in if you want to go back and fill them in later, or if you just want to leave it like this. It's a way to get all the layers quilted without too much trouble. It took me about 10 minutes to do each block, and that's with switching, taking the attachment off, the circular attachment, taking it off, putting it back on. It's about 10 minutes per block. It's very fast.